All right, I think we can start. So a warm welcome from my side to this great reInvent talk on how to drive cloud innovation in a very regulated service environment. And this talk is proudly brought to you by a great partner of us from Dynatrace. And Dynatrace also helped us very much on creating this great lineup here on stage. So joining us is Carsten Flott, the EMEA Central Director from Dynatrace. And moreover, the two of us, we are really, really honored to have a common customer here on stage. And this is actually the SHUFA. So, for those who are not so familiar with the term SHUFA, SHUFA stands for Schutzgemeinschaft für allgemeine Kreditsicherung. Clear? So, in English and in short, General Credit Protection Agency. Yeah. So, SHUFA is a very traditional and very established German financial institution, established almost 100 years ago. And they provide actually information on the creditworthiness of both of consumers and enterprises. So they really, really deal with high sensitive data. And joining us from the SHUFA is today the CIO, Andreas Adam, and his IT lead architect, Carsten Steckel. So please give them a warm welcome. Great, thank you. And allow me to introduce myself. I'm Lajos, I'm the enterprise technologist EMEA lead. So I'm a former CTO coming from the AWS customer side. And we all led through these really high, complex and large cloud transformations in the past. And over the years, I really learned about the pain that is involved in changing and transitioning into from these huge monolithic environments that pretty much look like that somehow, right? And also when I talk nowadays to my enterprise customers and their IT departments, they are somehow in similar situations. So highly complex, historically grown monolithic systems where it's really quite hard to do any kind of changes. And where it's also quite time-consuming to do the changes because the ownership for those kind of systems are pretty much gone. Yeah? And so it's quite hard to guarantee actually a stable operations in an environment like that. And in my point of view, the main problem is that with every project, with every customization, you will just increase the legacy, the technical debt, and the complexity. Right? And with this rising complexity, you will also see that this leads you finally also to a strong decrease of your whole IT velocity until you are completely stuck, right? And probably then you have very good intentions and you run faster and faster and faster and faster, but unfortunately there's not so much progress anymore. And in a lot of enterprise environments, no change is unfortunately very, very normal. Yeah? And when you take a look now on the spectrum of the frequency of change in enterprise IT, then the reality probably looks a little bit like that. So on the one hand side of the spectrum, you have the low frequency IT, where no change is somehow the default state. And every movement is involved with a lot of risks and instability, lots of effort. And on the other side of the spectrum, there you have the unicorns, right? So the high frequency enterprises where change is just constant. The flywheel of high frequent value delivery, also with limited risk involved, will not guarantee you stable operations. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the typical transition into the high-frequency IT. And therefore, let's take a look on our loved monoliths, right? So this high complexity of probably more than 1,000 development years, and it takes probably weeks to months to create, test, and roll out a new release, right? And what we want to do with it? Of course, we want to break our monolith. Into what? Into the service and into a service environment, or AKA microservice environment. And so I think we all dream a little bit about such an environment, right? A unicorn environment with a lot of modular, independent services that have a single business purpose, where it's very easy to do rollouts and where there's also very few risk involved. But when I was a CTO in the past and when I was in charge, my biggest concern was always that we just transfer the complexities that you have within the monolith into the infrastructure. And the problem that I often see nowadays also when I talk to IT teams is that they really have, or they really struggle to trace where the root cause of errors and incidents are coming from. But you know, if shit hits a fan, it can become really, really ugly, right? And so observability is playing a significant role for the resiliency of service environments. Because you need to identify very quickly where a problem is coming from. And then you also need to identify what kind of other services are also affected, right? And then you need to decide how to fix it. You need to identify who can fix it, right? So this is also often an issue, having 50 people in a call. And then finally, when the incident is over, of course, you want to know why did it happen and what can I do that it never happen again? So what can we do to fix it constantly? So observability is somehow the new testing. And so rather than just rolling backwards, you should also have a strategy to just roll forward. And now I'm very, very curious how SHUFA was able to transition into such a high-frequency enterprise IT and what they have learned on their very interesting journey. So, Andreas.
Yeah, welcome everyone also from my side. And let's have a deeper look about what is SHUFA about. SHUFA is the leading company in Germany when it comes to creditworthiness and financial reliability. We are almost 100 years old, which means we see us as one of the first fintechs in Germany. When looking into the US, you can compare SHUFA with Experian, Equifax, or TrustUnion. And so someone who is asking in Germany for a credit, for a new bank account, or even for renting a car or renting a flat, we are providing information about the credit scoring and about credit detailed reporting for the service provider, which means we're helping companies to evaluate the financial risk they have when they're making the business. And on the other hand, we're helping everyone first to avoid debt overload. And we're also helping them to get attractive offers from the companies. So how are we doing it? We are collecting information of almost 70 million people in Germany, which is around about 80% of all citizens living in Germany, so it's quite a lot, and it's very sensible data. In addition, we're having more than 6 million corporate information data as well. Most of the data is not public and is coming from our customer itself. So it's very sensible data, very confidential data, and we have to apply very high security measures on it. On the other hand, SHUFA is very well known in Germany. It has a high brand recognition of more than 98%, which means whenever we supplying something, when we releasing a new product, when we have issues, you can be sure it will be in all news in Germany and mostly on the headline. So it's a very high public interest in it. And also, since we're dealing with the financial sensible data of people, there's highly regulation from the government. So what kind of data we are collecting, how long we are allowed to use the data, and also what we can do, what kind of services we can do from those data. So let's have a look on our company strategy. So we have 3 big objectives we are targeting right now. One is increasing the data quality. By increasing the data quality, we want to keep the market-leading position for solutions in risk management and regulatory technology. On the other side, we like to increase the transparency for everyone who's living in Germany, which means we want to become a helping hand and appreciated enabler for individuals. And third, we believe that we can increase our services to customers on the company side as well as on the privacy side in our core domains of creditworthiness, identity, fraud prevention, and compliance. When looking on those focus, increasing data quality, business growth, and transparency, it's pretty clear that we need a clear product-centric approach. What does this mean from technology side? It's pretty cool. You can deploy new technology, but is it always the case? Let's have a look on the technology on our side. When I started with the company in 2021, SHUFA was working purely on-prem. So the focus was set on operations, which means high availability for company customers, high security standards apply, and high regulatory conformity. It's pretty clear that this is not working if you want a product-centric approach. So we started to evaluate what kind of technologies can help us to speed up releasing new features and products. And we identified cloud services as a solution, and we targeted to transform the technology from an operational focus to an innovation focus, which means we want to keep the availability, the security, and the regulation conformity, and like to add highly automated solutions, high scalability. We want to benefit from AI, and in the same way we're doing it, we want to improve significantly by factors the time to value. And this sounds cool from technology side, but on the other side, when you're in the SHUFA, it scares people. It scares people they are critical about it. What does it mean? When we now do innovation, do we increase the risk to lose all the trust government, customers keep in us? How can we do this? So we put it a framework for us. How do we want to transform? We want to focus on our business. So we were saying SaaS first, PaaS second, IaaS third. And since I believe that don'ts often are much stronger than the do's, we also defined no new services on-prem. And we also said we don't want to just lift and shift the solutions. Why is that? I'm personally convinced if you want to add the time to value by factors, it will not help you just to make the lift and shift. So we decided to rebuild and going on a journey with a target and with the expectation that we're doing this so that we are able to launch new digital products and features in months instead what we had before, which was years. And how this looks like from the architecture, Carsten will give you some insights.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Andreas. I will reiterate on a few statements that were there. We're working with customers that are highly regulated. So the first thing that we set out about 2 years ago was to set a good foundation on what we set up on AWS to run our own applications there. And what we did is use the landing zone concept, the AWS well-architected frameworks and everything to set up a good foundation to then have the spaces to run those workloads that we are going to migrate and reinvent on AWS. All the software that we have currently running on-prem, we are evaluating and are re-implementing on AWS with a cloud-native approach and trying to leverage all the innovation that AWS gives us there. To have all the security up and running, we decided that we need those service control policies in place. We are only using C5 services of AWS. And we set out to have an approach that might sound a little bit weird. We have no manual configuration in any AWS account. Everything is done via CI/CD and with Terraform and CDK scripts that set up all the configuration on AWS. That's not the only thing that needs to be set up, though. As we are setting up with every workload, the appropriate GitHub repositories, the SNCC organizations, the Artifactory repos, the Entra ID user and access controls for our access to AWS from the employee side. We also have in place authorization for our customers that we set up with realms and so forth. All that is done fully automated. And with it lies also a little bit of the tricks that you have to do. And sometimes you have to program your own providers of Terraform, because some of the software as a service offers that are out there, you can configure only by hand manually. You cannot really do that API-driven, maybe, but rarely with a good Terraform code. We are using GitHub for versioning and workflows, and we are introducing code spaces so that our on-premise development environments, we had workstations, we are getting rid of those. So everyone is working on code spaces. And for the software component analysis and the software static code analysis, we are using SNCC and Artifactory in combination. Now, the whole thing is critical in a sense that when we are transforming and reinventing those applications, we also have to consider that, remember what Lars said with the snails, we are coming from a long tradition of writing software, right? We are a 100-year-old, almost 100-year-old company, and we are doing IT since basically day one. We got rid of our mainframe in 2012. And then got all the way down to client server and have basically all the database providers you can imagine and vendors that we are running on-prem. So it's a complex environment that we are going to migrate. The main thing that with coming with those big legacy applications is that when you reinvent them, you have to introduce new ways of thinking. And what we wanted is that one thing that Andreas has mentioned is that we want to get better in understanding exactly what our users with the products that we provide, what are they doing and how are they using it, right? So that we can improve on the user needs and the data products that we provide for so many years. And what plays into that is that we need to observe what's going on. That has more than one dimension. It's not only that we want to understand how our products are being used, but when we are migrating from on-premise and having a monolith, say you have a 3-tier monolith that has a presentation layer, a business logic layer, and a persistence layer, a way of migrating that and reinventing it could be that you move the presentation layer from on-prem to the cloud, and leave the business logic and the persistence layer on-prem. And then in a second phase, you might decide to move the business logic also to AWS. And in the third phase, you move the persistence to AWS. What that already entails is, though, that you really need to know what's going on. Doing those migrations requires you to have a clear view of what is happening, where and when, and where your latencies are, where the data flows are, what is actually stopping you from, or in the case of an incident, what is really at stake there. One thing I want to iterate over is also that we have business processes that always basically hit all the components, meaning take, for example, the change of an address of one of our consumers that we are managing there. He comes in via email and says, well, I've moved. I have a new address, right? So that ends up in a Zendesk, which is in the cloud, and basically starts the business process. When the Zendesk then triggers processes in AWS to actually confirm that the address change is valid, and then puts the address change onto our system and actually books it and persists it, which is then on-premise. So we are running from Zendesk, a software as a service, through AWS, all the way to on-premise. And you want to trace that, right? You want to see where and when happens what, and maybe fails. So we have looked into many different solutions there, and basically found Dynatrace to be the valid option for us to have the capabilities to also monitor and do the logging and tracing from on-premise resources, as well as the resources on AWS, as well as what is happening on the software as a service side. One big feature that is new for us, and we're making good progress there, is that we are coming from alerting and monitoring background, didn't have a lot of tracing, but we had a lot of rules that triggered incident alerts. Kind of, there is something wrong with the database, the latency is going up, and there's a threshold, and as soon as it hits the threshold, it triggers an alert. Now, we want to go further now. With Dynatrace, we are capable of doing anomaly detection, where the system itself learns what a typical behavior of the application and the services are, what normal is, and as soon as it hits a point where it's behaving outside of the normal space, we get basically an alert, but it's not a rule-based alert. We can derive rules from that, but we want to leverage even more of those anomaly detections and see what we can do there, and basically using the AI part of Dynatrace there. All this is, of course, only as good as we can also measure it, that we improve in the speed of adding new features and getting our teams enabled to do the migration and the reinvention. And Andreas is going to show you and tell you a little bit about the key results, basically, we have produced the last 2 years.
So as before, as I said, we started the cloud journey with some expectations. And since I'm a fan of data-driven decisions, let's have a look what we achieved so far in the last 2 to 3 years. So when you look on the KPIs here, I think one is to mention, we increased the number of releases per year by a factor of 2 to 3, which is tremendous within 2 or 3 years. And you can say, okay, Andreas, you made a lot of innovation. You increased the time to value by 30%, but what did it make with your farmer focus on operational excellence? I can tell you that from the operational excellence, we're on the same high level of availability which we were before. And sometimes when you have so much dynamic in the company and in the technology transformation, it lets you sleep bad, unless you see that you can establish observability within less than an hour. Which means whenever we are establishing a new product team, new products, new services, we are able to have a very major observability within less than an hour due to the intelligence Carsten was telling about, and this let me sleep at night. So from the initiative side, and we said we had a product-centric approach, we came from a situation where less than 20% of the initiatives had the focus on customer impact. Less than 20%. And within the last 2 or 3 years, we were able to raise this up to 40%. All the rest is internal improvements, maintenance initiatives, that really to put the focus on customer impact, customer benefits, customer needs is a real key where we also put it a factor of almost 2 or maybe even more in the last 2-3 years. And as you see, as of now, with the rebuild strategy, we're having around about 20% of our productivity systems in the cloud. It's not done yet. From the outlook, I see that in 2025, we are targeting to reach the amount of 40% in the cloud. And I believe also from the factor of product releases, we will see a completely different phase already in the next year. And I believe, maybe even Carsten will cry a bit, but I believe that we can even double it in the next year. That's my personal impression. But since it's almost Christmas, Carsten, what are your wishes for the next year?
I would argue for the next years to come to take a little pressure out of my position here. The thing that struck me the most is that we wanted to come from a place where we not react on an incident, but rather act ahead of time, which is a thing that really struck me when I was waking up at 3:30 on a Saturday morning, having 50 people in the call, and we were not quite sure what the incident was, and within like 5 minutes, the first 50% dropped out, and every other 5 minutes, another 50% dropped out, until about 20 minutes into the call, it was clear, well, it was something related to a network switch being updated and adding latency between the backend and the database. Now, I didn't really feel like waking up on a Saturday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I said we need to get better there and have more pinpointed incident alerting, meaning the person who can actually do something is in the call and not 50 of us, right? So act, not react. So one thing. And of course, decrease then the mean time to repair, because we don't use as long for the root cause analysis. That should be something that the system itself should do. And we want to leverage that anomaly detection exactly for that purpose, that we get alerts because the system tells us, well, there is something going on that's a little fishy. You should have a look at it, but it pinpoints exactly what is happening and where it's happening. And if my wishes come true, we even know what the business impact on that is, right? And of course, one of the things that really is a key focus of iterating more quickly with the features that we put out is that we want to learn from everything that we observe there to use that information to improve the features that we put out and have that as a factual base input for feature design. This is basically what my wishes are for 2020.
Indeed, as a fact, I said we're coming from a time, you talk about releases and features, when new products took us years to launch. We are now able to launch every 4 months, in a cycle of every 4 months, a new product. And this is a big shift also in the mindset of company. And of course, it's not only transformation of technology, it's transformation of the mindset of the basic fundamentals of a company. And it's a big thing, not only technology.
Karsten is going to tell us now a little bit about Dynatrace and AWS and why they both are the winning team.
Yes, thank you, Carsten, Andreas. Really insightful presentation. Thank you, and congratulations to your success you had with the transformation into the cloud. And glad to hear that Dynatrace had a very important part on that. So you have heard some challenges you can have if you go transform your application or migrate your application into the cloud. And Dynatrace can address a lot of these challenges. Some of them you have heard already, but I would like to focus on one which is really important. I see very often in environments from customers I'm dealing with is that if you do this transformation, you have one goal. One goal means that you would like to have at least the same service quality as you had before. But even the main goal is having a better performance or better service quality at the end of the transformation. And what is Dynatrace doing to help you to achieve this is, first of all, give you transparency. Sounds easy, sounds fishy, but it's the first thing. You know how your application behave, how the service quality is, which components are involved, how they interact with each other, so that you identify immediately if there's some issue happening, some downtimes happening, some performance degradations happening. So you know you have an issue. And now in my own personal experience, it's not very often the case that you have just one issue at one time. You have maybe tens of problems at one time. And now the question is, okay, which one of them I should tackle first? And what Dynatrace does is, it just gives you some context and get all the information required and identify this business impact you have, how much customers or users are affected by any of these issues, which components are affected, which components have degradations, and take this information to help you to prioritize all these tens of issues, which one you should tackle first. This means, with Dynatrace, you know you have an issue which is critical. And the next typical question is, what I should do with that? How I can fix that? And that's the third pillar we have in Dynatrace, to help you identify and give you the information, the context, the details to fix this issue quickly. So this is what Dynatrace does, and why you should care, why this should be important to you. And here I would like to quote a survey from Gartner. Gartner said that 1 hour of downtime causes costs of $42,000. Gartner also said that during a transformation or migration into the cloud, in average, 87 of these downtimes happening a year. If you just make the math, you identify that 3.5 million, roughly, more than 3.5 million, of costs you will have just to deal with you have to deal with these downtimes or these issues. And if you then consider that Dynatrace just reduced these number of incidents by 50%, and that's a conservative estimate, but just assume 50%, means you can save money roughly of 1.5 million a year. And I haven't counted all the reputation damage you would have if you have some downtimes. As Andreas said, if you have some downtimes, in some companies, you'll be on the first line on the press. And this I haven't counted into it in these 1.5 million. So with Dynatrace, you can be ensured that we help you to be sure if you do the migration or transformation into the cloud goes smoothly. And what is now the combination with Dynatrace and AWS? And what I can say about this is, first of all, I'm very happy that I can announce, or not announce, I can repeat what AWS announced this morning. Dynatrace got awarded as the AWS EMEA AWS EMEA Technology Partner of the Year. Sorry, Technology Partner of the Year in EMEA for AWS. That we get awarded today. So just beside that, we are advanced technology partner for over years with AWS. We now got also the recognition that AWS sees us as a very important partner to ensure that people are willing to migrate or transform your application into the cloud. And to doing that means that we have to have support for all these environments that AWS provide. And this we do, as we have almost for every single environment support, so that you can be sure if you do a transformation or migration in AWS, a partnership between AWS and Dynatrace helps you to make it this as a success. So to summarize is innovations and fulfilling demands of customers and users are not an option anymore. It's mandatory. And to achieve this, you should at least consider and you should do migrations into the cloud or transformation into the cloud. And to really make this a success, you should consider also observability with Dynatrace in this journey, because the combination of these will help you to make this a success, so that this investment you do in this transformation will pay off for you. And that was just what I'm saying about Dynatrace, and now I'm giving back to Lajos.
All right. So first of all, thank you very, very much for all the insights from you. So it was really great. Thank you for that. And now it's about takeaways. Yeah, so some takeaways for you, and so we prepared a little Q&A here. And before I open the floor for question from the audience, I would say let's reflect a little bit on the key challenges, but also the key successes you encountered during the modernization process. And I would like to start with the SHUFA, and maybe we just start from right to left, or maybe in the middle. I don't know if you can decide. But so the question would be, so what has been the most significant learning from your modernization journey, actually?
There's two things. One is that you should do your homework well when you're working with regulated customers and set up your landing zone and everything that is required there before you start moving the first applications to AWS. That is, I think, the best advice I can give you there. The second one is that I always use a little picture there that for us it was very important to start that journey and migrate and reinvent all the applications, doing it with the oversight or with the overview of what's going on where. And I always use that picture that it doesn't feel right driving 150 miles down the German Autobahn. And the only thing you do is look in the rearview mirror. Doesn't feel right. So what you really need is you need to use your windscreen and look ahead of where you're going. And that's the reason we have observability basically baked into our foundational platform. You cannot get rid of it.
Andreas?
Yeah, so
insights?
From my side, two takeaways. If you're going the product-centric approach, do it without compromises, because you need all wheels in the line if you're comparing to the car. And the second is, if you're driving the German Autobahn with 150 miles per hour, don't be afraid if you have the right observability in place.
Right, and so I mean, from Dynatrace perspective, it's one customer, so you have many customers. Maybe you can give us a more broader perspective on this topic.
So what I've seen is that a lot of customers see the need to make innovations, see the need to make a change how they run their applications and their infrastructure and their IT, but they are concerned about all these challenges we just mentioned, right? They also see more the challenges instead of the benefits they can get. And so the key takeaway is just, what we do as Dynatrace, we just give them the confidence, hey, if you go in this route, we could be a partner helping you, and then they and supporting them in doing this move, which is tough because you do invest a lot of money for this, right? And this has to pay off. And so that's why so if you, as Andreas said, if you plan correctly and you have the right tools in place, it's worth to make this change, and it's worth to make this movement into it.